Right, this week's Big Box PC Gamers discussion point, topically enough, at least for us, the day after the whole US presidential inauguration and so on. That was yesterday, right?
Was it?
Day before.
Yeah,
day before.
Who cares?
It's hard to tell. Most people have been drinking heavily. Anyway, far more interestingly, we're going to be talking about politics in games, from political simulators through to the political environments of the worlds that we interact with. What got me started thinking about this was that we actually spend ages interacting with political figures in games. I mean, if you play a lot of RPGs, you're going to rock up at the king's place sooner or later. But beyond the fact that there apparently is a feudal monarchy that no one's complaining about, what is the role of these political figures? Are there games with deeper politics? Do we have favorites? Let's talk. The infallible dictator is kind of a popular one. The archetypal example here is Lord Vetinari from the Discworld games and obviously Terry Pratchett's novels, because he is a dictator and he is also a fair man, albeit one with a definite thing about mimes. Upside down scorpion pit. So you've got him. On a less comedic note, Lord British is also arguably another example of a fair dictator.
I was thinking a lot about Lord British before we started, and I was basically Ultima 4. You're set out on a mission to create a theocracy in the world of Britannia, but I'm not sure who the deity figure is supposed to be. Whether it's Lord British or the Avatar, it's hard to say.
Well, there isn't really supposed to be a deity figure, as I take it. It's kind of more analogous to Buddhism than to a theocracy, or a faith built around a deity. Mm-hmm. So it's almost more of a philosophy come theology hybrid.
Yeah. But they're the laws of Britannia are basically built around the virtues, though, right? I mean, that's how they rule their people. And then Richard Garriott really has a lot of fun messing with that over the course of the next few games, specifically Ultima 7, which is the one I'm most familiar with, where basically a rival religion sets up shop in Britannia, and the Avatar shows up, and barring the ritualistic murders, the people of Britannia are pretty much fine with it. Like everyone's pretty happy.
What's quite interesting is also you have got political figures who are adherents of the rival religion, the Fellowship. Although because the game has an obvious bias towards the virtues, and why not? They are the one true faith after all. The political figures who espouse the Fellowship, when you run into them, are often kind of corrupt in and of themselves. They favour fellow Fellowship members. Some of them are prone to theft and general conniving. So,
what's fascinating is that the Guardian sort of sets up this religion so that he can come back as like a religious ruler of his own religion. But then, when Serpent Isle swings around, what's really fascinating about it is, we talk about the virtues as the one true religion, but then, you got those serpent gods at the end, and the Avatar actually sees them. So, like, obviously they're real.
Right.
So their religion's obviously not BS either. But I mean, I don't want to get too much off on religion, but it's sort of hard to,
well, with Ultima, it's difficult,
one of the same,
right? Yeah. But also, I want to say regarding to Ultima 6, right? Sort of like explores that deeply of like, what if your true politics / religion actually sort of while you're doing your thing, it sort of screws
stomping
other people
up and down all over someone else's.
I thought it was a very interesting topic for a game. Today it would still be, I would say, especially back then.
Also, it very much raises the question of what a just war is, because the gargoyles have declared war against the humans. Sorry, spoilers for a 30-year-old game here. Yeah, the gargoyles have declared war on the humans, and their reasons are good because the humans have destroyed their world through their actions, which were the result of the Avatar trying to patch up the whole business in Ultima 5, which was some further political / Shadow Lord intrigue in which Lord British was banished down to the underworld. The virtues were corrupted. And in that rescue attempt, more spoilers for ancient games here, we're on a roll. In that rescue attempt, the Gargish world is turned upside down because just temporarily in Ultima 6, the world's flat. Let's just gloss over that. And the gargoyles are on the opposite side as far as anyone can work out. Then you've got the whole issue that in a very entirely vindicated and reasonable manner, the gargoyles have decided, fuck you people and fuck the Avatar in particular, we're setting off to war. And yeah, by any standards, they're embarked upon a just war, albeit one that, well, you can't even entirely call it misguided, to be honest. I kind of feel for the gargoyles' view of the Avatar through the series as a result.
Yeah, that game's got kind of a flowery ending, considering because everyone kind of comes together as friends.
Yeah, this is weird, especially how dark it sets out. Yeah, like in the opening, they're about to like stab you and stuff.
I think the peace and love. The peace and love and bring the lenses together cop-out ending.
It's a bit of a cheat, right? It's been a while, but don't they get like the lens that they can look through? Is that what happens?
So everyone gets to see the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom, and this apparently fixes everything.
I was like, that's a bit of a stretch, isn't it?
No, it's okay. Your world's been destroyed, but look, here's a book. How about the Bethesda games? I'm particularly thinking of the Elder Scrolls series. I'm most, apart from having dabbled with Arena in the early days, I'm most familiar with Oblivion and Skyrim. Skyrim's quite interesting because it's one of its plots. I don't know if you want to call it the A plot or the B plot. Probably the B plot is to do with the Imperials versus Ulfric's Nordic nationalists, and it's basically right. You can have these conquering globalists, or you can have these nationalists with extreme racist and fascistic tendencies. Actually, both of them have extreme fascistic tendencies. So yeah, and these are your political sides, There's also the big thing that I found a massive fuck you in Skyrim was that when you befriend them, you can't just get into a room with the leadership and stab them all. Which was very much what I wanted to do to Ulfric. So I think that's kind of an example of a game attempting to have political themes. And yes, I agree. It is a terrible example of a game attempting to have political themes. Feel free to edit. And yeah, it's an example of a game attempting to have political themes that ends up, having a couple of extremes and being kind of shallow for that.
It's just completely ancillary because you completely ignore it, and there's no real evidence that this civil war is going on unless you're actively engaging in it. And when you do, it doesn't seem all that heavy hitting. When you're doing
artillery outside Whiterun, that was kind of bad. I kind of felt for that.
Yeah.
It's also because I wanted to pop into Whiterun, and I had this whole conversation with Ulfric, and I figured, right, I need to get some stuff at Whiterun. It's like, what? No, but we're at war.
The genre that I think uses politics a lot, just in general, is strategy games, of course, right? And I know the genre of political simulators still exists, and there's still games being released in it. I haven't played any, but back in the DOS games, there are quite a few. Some of them are very different, but most of them are kind of similar in a way. And I actually own a couple. One that I want to show is, I'm going to place two today. I'm going to pull out all the boxes. Is Balance of Power. This is the first edition of the Chris Crawford game, and it's actually it's an example that I use often to show people who are not familiar with the computer gaming of the 80s. I sort of how different it could be. I show them this and like a box of a flight simulator, maybe like Falcon 3.0, just to illustrate the difference the span of the audiences. Like we had our shooter games, but then we also had games like this, where it was just charts and tables and not a lot of graphics. This one is in black and white. It's a port from Mac. But another interesting technical detail about this game came out a couple of months after the release of the original Windows 1. And this is a Windows 1 game. It actually comes with the runtime version of Windows 1 that there's only a desktop and a shortcut to this game. So you cannot really do anything but do this. It's a fairly unique example. The updated version of it, the 1990 edition, it was a Windows 2 game, but it didn't come with a runtime version. You could request it on a floppy. And they did the same. Microsoft did that for the Excel 2 and 3, I think, for DOS as well. It was sort of bundled with the runtime version of Windows. If I don't know if any other examples, if anybody's watching this video knows, please let me know. It's pretty cool to see it. This game, serious simulator. It's Chris Crawford game, and very boring. so there is that. But of the games that are not boring, and one of my favorite examples is actually this. It's a Crisis in the Kremlin. Nice box with the Gorby here and stuff. This game actually came out in 1991 towards the tail end, but it was obviously developed before the collapse of the Soviet Union, even though this is what it's about, which is something really cool. Even in the promo shots, like the shots that they used in the box, I don't know if my webcam is really shitty, but it's you see the protest here, photo of a protest, and it says the sign here says Yeltsin calls for a strike. So that was very, very current, and I actually like the stylistic of this game. It's a hard game, but it's easy to get into. I think it sort of has this. You're become a premier of the Soviet Union in the 80s during Gorbachev times, and you can select one of the three parties, sort of the Communist Party, the like Reformative Party, or like Democratic Party, and you sort of go through the events of the 80s, which are actually, like in 1986, Chernobyl power plant blows up and all that stuff. Like all of them follow the events up until 1991, and then they're random afterwards. And you sort of have to keep the balance between all you do is answer phones, sign papers, and budgeting is actually fairly serious. You have to do math. They actually give you a little calculator in the corner. Like they're not calculating stuff for you, but you can use the calculator to figure stuff out. It's fairly detailed, and I really like this game. It's fun to play. The presentation is really, really cool. All the Soviet stuff, I'm very surprised how accurately it depicted. Like all the Soviet equipment and just Soviet stylistic. I think this is captured very well. The bonus of having the book, the box is what I actually got it for. Is it comes with this late 80s book called Class, How Soviets Really Live. And despite getting this for this book, I've never actually read this. I'm very interested in this, but I've never got to sort of read it yet, but I will. I'm wondering just how much bullshit is in there versus real stuff. Probably a lot. But yeah, I mean, political simulators, not many that I have, but other ones like Floor 13 is really good. Sort of more shadowy British intelligence thing, and following the same thing. They're all kind of the same. They like Crisis in the Kremlin. The UI is mostly a desk and some sort of a menu system that you go through. And I do enjoy these. Which one? Shadow President is another one like that. That's a bit of a more involved, and it's terrible sequel, Cyber Judas, which is like a game so 90s it's impossible to just take seriously.
That's an amazingly terrible title as well. Cyber Judas, really.
It's really bad. So the presentation is just like the most incredible, like, bad political cyberpunk you can like imagine. A bunch of other games like Hidden Agenda is also one of those games where you're a leader of a fictional sort of like Latin American just sort of nation. That's kind of like Crisis in the Kremlin, but simplified. you sort of meet people and promise them stuff, and then you try to make up, with your promises, or just try to bullshit the people and try to keep your power. All those things existed in the 80s, I think. And of course, president-elect, right? That's kind of a big one, but I think it's almost. I tried playing it last year, and wow, like you really need to be familiar with candidates and the parties of that time to be able to play that game, because you actually have to fill all of that stuff in, which is really a weird choice. But yeah. Well, speaking of strategies, right? Like something not away from actual political simulators. I have one box left here, but that's obviously not going to surprise anybody. But it's also the one with the least politics in the series, I think, is Original Civilization, of course. Awesome game, but as far as politics actually being integrated in the gameplay, this is actually fairly limited. It's just whoever, when you meet the other nations, whoever has more power gets to demand things, and that's essentially the how it works. But it was nice to see, you can have like Ramses against Stalin and stuff. And I actually, to be honest with you, I've never played any Civilization game after 2, because I've played 1 and 2 for so long that I've eventually realized that months of my life I just spent playing Civilization. From that point on, I said no more Civilization for me, and
175 hours on Civ 5 so far.
And I kept buying them in bundles. Like I own up to, I don't own 6, but I own every single Civ game up to that, and I've never ever touched them.
I have a couple of one older and one newer sort of political sim to sort of draw on. The older one, which I sadly don't have a big box for and would very much love, but I've never seen one, is the King of Dragon Pass, which is in the Glorantha RPG universe. It's another one of these that combines sort of political and religious elements, and the religio-cultural aspects. It eventually turns out are vital to the success of your civilization, to the point where you have to learn about mythic tales in order to go on these kind of vision quest type things, where someone becomes an avatar of a myth. But in addition to that, a very important aspect of it is gaining the support of fellow tribes, which you have to do by making diplomatic negotiations, by sending out scouts and meeting people, by maybe specifically finding a valuable treasure that will make others respect you more, giving people gifts of cattle, and you're also responsible for sort of how much magic gets invested in farming and how much gets invested in war and all this sort of thing. So you've got these quite in-depth political sim in a very well-realized fantasy world, including intelligent ducks with spears, which is always great. Following on from the King of Dragon Pass, a more modern game is Long Live the Queen, which is this. It's not procedurally generated, so it differs from FTL in that way. But it has a kind of FTL-ish feel to it in that, well, there are some random elements too. But you are a princess who has just come to a kingdom, and following the death of your mother, and you have to invest in learning different skills and interacting with different courtiers and diplomats and relatives and people who might want to marry you and people who might want to wage war on you and people who might want to assassinate you. And your ability to interact with these is all based on how much experience you've got in different skills. So you can learn to dance nicely if you want to fit in at the royal ball and get loads of interesting intelligence. You can learn magic for defensive or offensive purposes, and so on and so forth. And all of this ultimately ties into all this court intrigue and politicking between you and your neighboring countries. I think again, going back to the sort of lack of political depth in a lot of game worlds, I think it's oddly something that sci-fi games are particularly prone to. They fall back on a lot of very standard cliches. Mostly dystopian these days. I'm starting to get so bored of dystopian sci-fi. You've got the corporations running the universe, and now it's this might is right anarcho-capitalist hellhole. Then you've got the sort of peace and love and surprisingly large military gay space communist future utopia a la Star Trek. But beyond that, you don't seem to get that much diversity. I mean, for example, that you could if there's not an evil AI, there's certainly an oppressive futuristic government.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not really science fiction, though, is it?
Well, see, this is what too much dystopian sci-fi leads to.
Yeah, it starts coming true.
I think Brano mentioned in chat before a game that used politics as a background and not in the game mechanics in any way is Cryo's KGB, right? Beautiful presentation, beautiful music, beautiful graphics and stuff, and game
also available as Complicity, Conspiracy, with guest appearance from Donald Sutherland.
Yes, a bad one. He's just talking on the camera all the time. Ah, it is you, my nephew or whatever, my son. I forget. I play the floppy version. It's less annoying, and plus it actually says KGB on it without it being taken out. But the thing about KGB, I mean, it's a fairly badly designed game because it was an interesting concept of you dealing with bureaucracy as you're trying to investigate things, but it's too hard. It's way too hard. It's like not
lots of timed events, aren't there? Sort of having to be in the right place at the right time.
Timed events, and you can rewind, right? But like you still have to figure out what to do, and you're not given time to figure out what to do. You have to sort of hit certain actions at a very specific sequence, and you sort of really have to know what the sequence is way in advance. So like it gets to the point where it's so frustrating that you can't just experiment to figure out what to do. Like they're not even giving you enough time for that. So I'd say, like, to people who haven't played it, check it out. It's really cool in a way. It takes a Dune concept and sort of pushes it into a slightly different direction, which was interesting, but I think it fails on a very fundamental level. But it definitely uses that sort of fake Soviet thing as interpreted by French fairly well, I would say. But another Cryo game that actually uses in-game world for politics, weirdly, that I haven't thought before, just hit me, is Dragon Lore, right? The first Dragon Lore game. The good one, I guess, if you can call it that. An ugly, terrible game. But the whole concept of the game is you're like this peasant who technically is a prince. So you've been told on your 18th birthday that you're a prince, and you go around this land, and the game is sort of non-linear. You can help some people, and some people are like feuding, and depending on who you help, that is like you by the end of the game you have to earn a trust of certain amount of people who will vote for you as a prince. So you
this is the weirdest monarchy I've ever heard of.
Yeah, the game is not great. I know a lot of people love it. It's great for comedic value because you can't. It was ugly in 1994, and it's even more ugly today, but lots of unintentional comedy in that game. But it does have that interesting kind of a concept where, like, of optional adventures and optional quests in order to achieve a goal.
The quest for glories are quite interesting because the way it kind of moves you through different settings. And Quest for Glory 3 in particular, I seem to recall has quite a lot of political intrigue going on in Tana.
And also a very unique setting, right, for a game not often explored.
Yeah, I mean, the Quest for Glory 2 was unusual enough in having a somewhat Middle Eastern inspired setting, but you very rarely get African settings in games as Quest for Glory 3 did. I mean, now we're starting to see a few coming through. Mostly because of African development studios actually starting to get into the race, which is great. I will note that Democracy 3, which I mentioned in passing earlier in the context of my successful communizing of France, the British always assassinate me when I try that, by the way. Democracy 3, there is a standalone add-on pack, which you don't need to have the original the original Global North version to play, which I believe has a number of African states in it that you can run. And the nice thing is that with that game, the temperament of your voting public is apparently based on actual statistical data about voter allegiances in the countries in question. So it ends up being quite an interesting political sim. Plus, if you play like me, you can get yourself colourfully assassinated in all countries except France. That's the reason I moved here, incidentally. I just have more faith that people won't get pissed off with me and assassinate me.
Have you guys played Tropico? Because I own it, but somehow I've gotten to this point in my life and not played it.
I know.
I haven't. So many people love it. And I know it's very political, right? Like,
yeah, you play the dictator of Banana Republic, and no, as someone very dear to me is very into it, and I have not played it, despite being reliably assured it's amazing, and I know I'd love it. So
yeah. I think that those
should
games
probably
are
be
like,
on my to-do list.
I've been told it's like a more political Settlers, essentially, just like Settlers with like a layer of politics, actually, internal and external, like slapped on top of it, basically.